Hi there again, I'm Bernie Tormey and I'm here to answer part 2 of the enormous amount of questions I've had. So here goes. Okay, here's a question from Alex Grady. Outside of rock and roll, are there any other things you listen to? Also, what other things do you find influences your work, artists or writers, etc.? That's an interesting question, Alex. I mean, to be honest, I'd have to say that it's more about the things I don't listen to. I've always had like eclectic tastes. That sounds a bit strange, but yes, eclectic tastes. And that's included, you know, folk music, jazz, ethnic, classical at times, less so classical. I really have never listened to a great amount of metal because it's a busman's holiday kind of to me. I don't hear people doing in it anything that I haven't been involved in the past. So it isn't challenging to me. That isn't to say it isn't good. It's, you know, personal taste. I've always preferred to hear things that I haven't heard before, or very kind of primitive things, or simplistic or complex. Just things that are different to what I have done in the past, because that's how I get ideas. For example, if I was to kind of point out some albums that over for the past, say, fortnight I've played, it's Incredible String Band, Abida Parveen, Neil Young and Crazy Horse. It is rock, but it's always a bit scratchy, and I like that. Blues. I definitely still play an awful lot of blues, so I've been listening to Mr. Muddy Waters, McKinley Morganfield, a true genius. Brian Eno, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. That was actually in the Gillan days. That was one of my favourite albums, and John's too, and Collins. Great, still like it. And, oh yeah, Bob Dylan singing Frank Sinatra. You're never going to talk to me again after you heard that one. I really like it, but you know, there you go. Steve Earle. I'm a great Steve Earle fan. Nirvana and Michael Cronin. And to be honest, that isn't everything. You know, it's chieftains. I've always played an awful lot of Irish folk, Irish and Scottish, Celtic things. I really like the lyrics of an awful lot of that stuff. I really like also the lyrics of an awful lot of country stuff. I mean, I don't mean Garth Brooks. I mean Steve Earle, Townes Van Zandt. I mean, basically the kind of outlaw stuff. I really like that. An awful lot of it's awfully clever. In terms of other things, I really, again, get off on writers. James Joyce being a kind of an all-time fave, but lots of other things. I just like the kind of cleverness of words. And it helps me have ideas, you know, subjects, because it's always hard to find something to hang a musical idea on. So it's just basically everything. I mean, Carmen Burana, I don't know, man, everything, just everything. I mean, I'm still a rock fan. I still play Stones albums, ZZ Top, but it tends to be traditional stuff that I kind of get off on, and in an awful lot of ways that's closer to jazz. in my opinion. So, thanks Alex. Okay, now here's another question from Ian Richardson. What do you believe is your proudest achievement in your musical career? Proudest achievement, it isn't actually an event. I think the proudest achievement I have is that I'm still alive and still playing, and like one of my heroes, Rory Gallagher, I think I'm improving as I age, you know. Well, I think that anyway. A lot of other people may not agree, but I think that. So it's really, I don't have a kind of an album or you know, an event, because it's all in the past. I'm more interested in being able to plough on and to carry on, and that, in the light of an awful lot of people who I know who are great players who are no longer around, that is my proudest achievement. Thank you, Ian. Thanks. Okay, here is a question from Robert Owen Schmidt. Robert asks, what is your pedal setup, and how do you keep your guitar in tune? And also, are you going to tour the United States? Okay, Robert, I actually have two pedal setups dependent on the amp I'm using. If I'm recording, I generally have a Plexi, and it's not as bright as the vintage modern that I have been using live recently. The Plexi, I have a Pete Cornish built pedal board. It's the only battery pedal board Pete Cornish ever built, I think. And the pedals that I use in it are a 70s Electro Harmonix Big Muff. It's a US, obviously, because they were the only people who built them in those days. I had a choice of three. They were all completely different. If you opened them up, they were all completely different, and this particular one sounded better to me than any others. That is going into a Boss graphic EQ. That's changed over the years because it was originally an MXR graphic EQ, and then an Ibanez graphic EQ. Both the MXR and the Ibanez were incredibly noisy, so I changed to a Boss. It's cleaner and it's, I suppose, more kind. I'm not so sure that it's, I think of all of them, the sound-wise, the Ibanez I liked most. That's going again into a noise gate that I can't remember what it is. It's probably a Boss, I don't know. It's in the board. So that sound is pretty much the sound I use recording, and it's nice because on a Strat single coils, if you have the volume pot in different places, the tone changes, also dependent on how hard you hit. So an awful lot of the time I'm not at 10 because it's a tiny bit cleaner and more grindy. So for live, I actually have a Russian Big Muff, and again a Boss graphic EQ and a Boss noise gate, and that is going into a 100 watt vintage modern, and it's pretty interchangeable with the other one. The Russian Muff is a lot warmer than the American one, but then on the other hand, the amp is an awful lot brighter than a Plexi is, so it balances out. I mean, to be honest, regardless of what I plug into, I always appear to sound like me. That's, you know, that's a blessing and a curse, shall we say, but it is me anyway. So yeah, how I keep the guitar in tune. I have my own way of setting up the bridges. It's kind of floating. Tightest on the two outer screws, and it will only go down. I'm not able to bend up like those whiz-bang bridges, so any bending up is left hand. It kind of, you know, it either works or not. I have, I've got about 5 strats that it works on. They tend to be one-piece older bodies. They tend to be either 60s or more modern. The 80s and the CBS era ones don't really seem to like it, or I haven't ever been able to get them to stay in tune. Mind you, you know, if you ask anyone who plays in the band with me, they all say I'm out of tune, usually. How dare they? Intellectual pygmies. So, yeah, you always have the problem of air temperature. It always happens, it drops if it's a hot show. Tour in the US, I would love to, but I can't promise anything. These days it's incredibly hard to get in. To get in if you are a band, the immigration and the legal costs are like, you know, 10 grand. It's very expensive. To do that, you have to have a tour, and you have to have a promoter, and you have to have a record company. I don't have any of those. I have tried very many times, and an awful lot of friends in the US have also tried too. It just hasn't happened because I can understand people not wanting to take a chance on a guy who isn't exactly a household name. But on the other hand, I have an awful lot of fans in America and friends, and I would really like to. I hope it changes. I hope I have the chance. So fingers crossed, you know, or perhaps a pledge. I don't know how. You know, I have actually thought about a pledge to do a US tour, but the problem is, you know, the US is a very big place. So, you know, if you're going in and you're only playing in New York, there's people, you know, who are kind of 2,000 miles away who want to see you, you know. So it's not an easy, it isn't an easy option. Anyway, thank you for that question, Robert.